On a quiet afternoon in a modest room, high up, shirtless and relaxed with a towel draped over his head, glanced curiously at Han, who sat focused at a desk, and asked if the laptop had been tidied up. A gentle hush filled the air as Han, bowed under the weight of sorrow, was comforted by Hyup's steady hand, softly acknowledging the gesture with a quiet affirmation. Noticing Han's discomfort, Hyup, still drying off from a shower, reached out with concern and gently asked if Han felt ill, admitting his earlier anger had faded and hoping to ease the tension between them. Han lay back with a heavy sigh, his vulnerability surfacing as he admitted with a tense voice that his frustration ran deeper than anyone realized. Hyup gently placed his hands atop Han's head, reassuring him that there was no need to worry about any virus and offering quiet comfort through the tender gesture. Han stood lost in silent contemplation, his serious gaze and poised hand betraying the weight of unspoken thoughts. In the shadowed stillness, Han's curiosity sharpened as the revelation emerged that Director Yoon was, in fact, Yoon Min-jae's son, shifting the dynamic between the younger man's contemplation and the elder's quiet confidence. On an overcast afternoon brimming with secrets, the enigmatic Director Yoon stood quietly, a single, meticulously folded handkerchief peeking from the jacket pocket and drawing curious, lingering attention. Han gently wrapped the handkerchief around a younger Director Yoon's hand, the silence heavy with Han's remorse as he privately admitted that his own actions in the past may have shaped the troubled man before him. Han sat anxiously before his laptop, thoughts racing about what to say when he finally met the mysterious sender, while nearby, Hyup watched in silent confusion as Han wondered whether the secret file was a deliberate warning. A caution mark surface, a lone phone vibrated with sudden urgency, electrifying the suspense as if fate had answered at the most critical moment. On a calm afternoon, as a phone lit up with an incoming call from Jigo Yang, Han quietly identified the caller to Yun Hyup before handing him the device at his request. In a sunlit office, Han sat calmly across from Hyup, his voice steady as he confirmed his identity and asked if there was anything more. Hyup stood determined, revealing to those around him that he had just found the last track location of Hyun-kyung's phone. Han gazed up at the towering building, curiosity flickering in his eyes as he wondered aloud if this was truly the place they had been told about. Han froze mid-step, his voice trembling as he demanded to know if Hyun-kyung was living in their building, disbelief and dread etched across his face as a dark aura loomed behind him. In a cluttered office stacked with files, a shirtless Hyup leaned back with a smug smile as Han, visibly worried. In the gloom of a sparsely furnished apartment, where a lone bicycle leaned against peeling walls and scattered belongings hinted at neglect, an unspoken skepticism arose as someone wondered aloud if Hyun-kyung, with his considerable earnings, would truly choose to live in such a rundown place. In a small, sunlit room, Han sat with curiosity etched across his face as Hyup, still drying off with a towel draped over his head, calmly handed back the lost phone, explaining uncertainty about its unusual location. Now, clutching the returned phone, he stared into the swirling shadows, anxiety mounting as he silently questioned why Hyun-kyung might be in the building and whether another hidden grudge was waiting to surface. In a cluttered Seoul apartment bathed in morning light, Hyup stood shirtless and focused, holding up a calendar as he reasoned that since Hyun-kyung was last tracked 2 days ago in this very place, there was a strong chance the fugitive remained somewhere in the city. In the shadowed quiet of an empty hallway, suspense hung in the air as they pieced together that the missing phone had briefly connected here, prompting one to suggest they look into the residents of this place. In a brightly lit room, Hyup, his eyes resolute, lifted his shirt slightly as he agreed to take action immediately. In a quiet corridor lined with metal mailboxes, Hyup stood poised before them, calmly explaining that he just needed to take a look. In a quiet, sunlit office, Hyup put on his jacket and assured Han he would return soon, while Han nodded and said he would leave it to him. In a cluttered office where tension lingered, Han turned abruptly as the persistent ring of the phone drew an annoyed sigh, muttering that Jigo Yang really should have settled things with just one call. In a tense moment, Hyup stood frozen in shock, his phone screen flashing an urgent call from Director Yoon, anxiety tightening his grip as he braced for what was to come. Then, as unease lingered, he hesitantly answered, muttering to himself that this caller seemed untrustworthy before offering a nervous greeting into the phone. In a dimly lit office, Han Ishin's shadowed figure pressed a phone to his ear, his voice tense as he identified himself and, ignoring Director Yoon's anxious greeting, demanded without pretense to know if they had seen it. Han hesitated before nervously admitting that he'd seen it, their voice faltering as uncertainty filled the air. Han clutched the phone with trembling hands, uneasily revealing that Director Yoon was actually Yoon Min-jae's son and admitting, with a nervous laugh, that memories from those days were lost to an accident. In a dimly lit room heavy with suspense, Hyup's eyes narrowed as he gripped a black object and pressed, with pointed curiosity, how the other person had discovered he was Yoon Min-jae's son. The desperate young man Han clutched his phone, anxiety etched across his face as he pleaded over the line, asking how he could possibly make amends and suggesting, with a trembling voice, that perhaps offering personal comfort was all he had left to give. Han recoiled in distress, covering his mouth as a menacing shadowy hand crept closer, insisting with desperate resolve that he could never force that overwhelming object back into his mouth, not even in the face of death. Director Yoon explained to Han that he sought no money, only compensation measured in emotion, and asked if Han understood. In a dimly lit room heavy with tension, Han sat gripping his knee, anxiety etched across his face as he reflected on how little he understood about Yoon Min-jae's affairs and quietly pleaded for guidance, vowing to do his utmost if only Director Yoon would tell him what to do. Director Yoon insisted that he knew Han weren't the mastermind. Han then questioned why they were trying to provoke him. In the shadow of two solemn adults, Han recalled how Director Yoon's parents barely noticed him, offering only meager candies as a token of their neglect. The younger Director Yoon gazed down at the wrapped candy in his hands, reflecting with a faint, resigned smile on how he often forgave past mistreatment and found fleeting solace in those bittersweet moments. Han sat with shoulders tense, processing the shock of learning that Yoon Min-jae and his wife had abused Director Yoon during childhood. Director Yoon accused Han of having taken away those bitter sweets, resentment sharp in every word. In a dimly lit corner, the quiet stillness is broken only by the sight of 3 candies scattered near an open snack bag, their presence inviting a gentle reflection on the simple sweetness they once offered. Younger Director Yoon's serious gaze hinted at the weight of an impending realization as he contemplated the events unfolding before him. Two Uncone men are shown as an unspoken melancholy settled between them, shaped by a yearning for something bittersweet that would not fade. Bathed in stark light, the younger Director Yoon stood alone amid the dissolving silhouettes of others, his gaze fixed as he reflected that he preferred something lasting over a fleeting sweetness that vanishes the moment it is consumed. Director Yoon sat calmly with a phone pressed to his ear, his thoughts drifting as he considered how much had changed since the past. In a dimly lit corridor thick with tension, a terrified young man clutches his phone as a gloved Director Yoon seizes him from behind. While Han reflected on Director Yoon's unsettling, almost sticky voice revealed the reasons behind Director Yoon's troubling evolution. Now, the camera lingers on a dimly lit shelf crowded with electronic devices and scattered documents, as the narration grows weightier with the revelation that his parents had abused him before dying and abandoning him, casting a deeper shadow over the somber scene. In the dim haze of rain, Han stood solemn and somber, the downpour tracing his features as he reflected intensely on his entire existence. As Han was spacing out, Director Yoon yelled his name with a gravity that instantly sharpened his alert gaze. On a quiet desk scattered with books and stationery, the glow of a laptop screen reflected the serious gaze of Han, as a commanding voice from the device asked if he understood what needed to be done. Leaning back into his chair, Han studied the piece of candy in his hand with a calm, contemplative air, the lingering tension from the earlier exchange giving way to a silent, mysterious resolve. Surrounded by a swirl of colorful candies, Han paused mid-call, his surprise clear as he questioned whether he was really just expected to buy and send sweets. Suppressing a shaky laugh as he sat alone by the desk, he admitted to himself with uneasy humor that nothing would ever be that simple. Han's anxious grip tightened as Director Yoon's name flashed, and with a shaky breath, Han muttered in frustration that the situation would have to be figured out alone. Han sat alone, wiping sweat from his brow as the weight of exhaustion pressed heavily upon him. Director Yoon sat immersed in reflection as curiosity flickered in his eyes while he pondered what was truly meant by the word emotionally.